evening, everybody, and welcome to Seniors Vote. I'm Dan Roberts, the publisher of the Vegas Voice, and our job is to make you aware of all the candidates running for political office. We want you to decide who you think will best represent you. We're very lucky to have today a wonderful gentleman, a candidate for the United States Senate on the Republican side, and that is Mr. Tony Grady. So, Tony, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I guess let's start with your background, Tony. A little bit about yourself so that the audience knows and our seniors know exactly who you are, et cetera, because you're not from Clark County. You're from up in Reno.
I'm up in Reno, but there's this aspect that you seniors need to know.
Go ahead.
I've been married for 40 years.
Same woman.
Same woman.
Okay, yeah.
40 years. Same woman.
Yeah.
She's put up with me.
I guess, yeah.
And she's wonderful. So I've been married to my bride for 40 years. We have 4 children. Now, I went to the Air Force Academy, and as your seniors know, children don't listen. So my oldest went to Annapolis, and the baby went to West Point.
Oh, my. Okay.
Imagine that, because they don't listen.
Yeah.
And then in the middle, I have one that majored in molecular biology and one that's an athletic trainer. Why am I talking about my kids? We could spend the rest of the day doting on them here, but my kids are successful.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to help young people be successful. We need to elect leaders that want all American children to be successful. That's the most important thing that I want your audience to know about me, that I know how to help young people be successful. They're our future, and I can do the job.
And I mean, you're a military man.
Yes.
You were a lieutenant colonel.
Yes.
And you left that, and then what happened after you retired from the military?
Well, I have to talk about what happened in the military because the folks really know. So let me now start at the beginning and come close.
Go ahead.
Just come into it. My parents were born in the Jim Crow South. They had all of these obstacles. They never, ever, ever talked to me about being a victim.
Mm-hmm.
My parents knew that education was important. They passed that on to my sister and I. And my dad got tapped early on to get into foreign service. He became a vocational education professor. And in foreign service, he was helping places, developing nations, build schools and vocational schools. So I got to live in Africa. We came back to Philadelphia, and then a little bit later, I got to live in Bangkok, Thailand, and I graduated from high school there.
Mm-hmm.
What's important is that your audience needs to know that I saw socialism and communism, upfront, personal, abject poverty for their people. That made me patriotic. That caused me to go to the Air Force Academy. I became a pilot. I became a test pilot. I commanded the B-2 stealth bomber test squadron, $24 billion program. I commanded it during its most intensive flight test time. The Air Force and the country put that responsibility in me. So I know how to run things. Mm-hmm. Also, during that time in the Air Force, I worked in the Pentagon on what we call the Air Staff, and I was responsible for the bomber portion of the president's budget. I also took generals over to speak to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. What people need to know is that I understand the budgeting process and how it works, or probably more importantly, how it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I understand that. After 20 years in the Air Force, I flew for FedEx for 20 years.
Oh, okay.
And during that time period, I got to see a lot of the places I saw when I was little. Tokyo doesn't have benjo ditches anymore.
Yeah.
Singapore doesn't have any dirt roads anymore, ultra-modern city. But what was important is that, I saw how an American company affected people overseas. When I was in Indonesia, even when I was in China, those people were very proud to be working for FedEx, and that impact that American business had. I also started my own startup business. I ran it for 11 years. It was called Cinerobotics, and it was to create small medical devices. I eventually had my head handed to me, but the reality is I learned how regulations affect you, and I learned what happens when you put your capital at risk. So I learned those things. So what happened was that 42 years ago, I became familiar with Nevada because I flew in what's known as Red Flag. It's a mock air war that's conducted out at Nellis Air Force Base. So when I was a young lieutenant, that's how I got introduced to Nevada. I deployed here about 4 times.
Uh-huh.
But the reason we wound up here is that through my final years at FedEx, when my wife and I, who were living in Dayton, Ohio at the time, were planning to move, we were looking at San Antonio, Texas, because it's a Air Force friendly town, and we'd been there. And we have relatives in Texas. But this tall, 6'5", thin cowboy who's a friend of mine, Walt Reed, comes bounding across the ops room. He says, "What's this I hear about San Antonio?" He goes, "You're not going to San Antonio. You need to look at Reno."
Yeah.
I said, "Walt," I said, "what part of Canada is Reno in?"
Yeah,
He goes, "You're geographically challenged. You need to get there." So we house hunted in both places. And we liked the mountains in Reno. We liked the high desert. But what sold the deal was the people. So we moved to Reno, and we loved it. So we were putting our feet up, and I was going, "I'm in Reno. I probably should go to the air races since I've never been."
Right.
So I go to the air races, and when I'm there, I run into this guy. I go, "I know you." He goes, "I know you." Ends up being one of my 1977 classmates from the Air Force Academy, and his name was Kevin Roll. He happened to be racing jets there at the Reno air races. So he took me over to his mates who were racing jets, and I ran into a guy by the name of Rick Vandam, who's been a winner of the air races.
Right.
Rick went to the Air Force Academy like I did, but his brother was in my squadron at the academy, and we were friends. I walked into an instant family.
Oh.
So that happened 8 years ago when we moved here, and Reno's been home. Of course, as a military man, I knew that we would be accepted into any community that we went to, and we chose Nevada. So that's the story of how I got to be here.
It's something.
So, yeah.
But, I mean, you're extremely successful,
Yes.
flew all over the country, and now you're running for U.S. Senate.
Right.
And the question I'm asking everybody is, why in the world would somebody want to throw his hat into the ring and get involved in that place?
I already told you about my kids.
Yeah.
In addition to the 4 kids, I have 4 grandkids. The United States is on a bad path. My children and grandchildren will not have the opportunities that I had if we continue on this path. I am successful because my parents raised me with American values. I've raised my children with American values. I want American values to be championed. We do not have leaders that support that. So I have thrown my hat into the ring because I have a skill set, a broad skill set, to be able to deal with the problems that we're dealing with. One of the reasons that we are where we are right now is that good people don't get into politics, and look at what we've got. So I would not be able to look at myself 3 to 5 years from now and the country going down, and I look in the mirror and go, "What did you do to try to stop it?" So I threw my hat in the ring because of that.
Well, the next question is whether rightfully or wrongfully, you say federal politics, federal office, U.S. Senate, during this election year coming up, one name will always come up, and that is Trump.
Yes.
So I guess the question is, are you a Trump supporter? Are you a Trump detractor? If he tries to endorse you, will you run like hell away? Or would you say, "Oh my God, thank you so much, Mr. President," and give the guy a hug?
I give the same answer about Trump to anybody, whether
Okay.
you like him or dislike him. And here's my answer. When Trump was president, we were energy independent.
Right.
When Trump was president, we had the lowest unemployment rate in my lifetime. When Trump was president, other countries around the world were not messing with us. That's what happened when Trump was president. There are some people that think, and rightfully so from the standpoint, because they're Americans and this is a free country, that there should be a certain decorum out of the president. There were times when that decorum may have been lacking with President Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I am a person that is interested in performance. And I think that the president's policies were solid. And I think those policies really benefited our country. That is my view of President Trump.
Fair enough. This is your second time, I guess, you're getting involved in politics. You were involved in the lieutenant governor race.
Right. And what caused me to get into that was, in addition to the air races, I also helped with what we call the Innovation Center. So UNR up there in Reno has like an incubator to help businesses that have been either startups or in business less than 5 years. And I was one of the mentors. Through the air races and the mentors, I found out what we were trying to do in Northern Nevada by attracting high-tech businesses. I immediately realized that the workforce that we are training can't fill those jobs. And I'm hearing it from the businesses and everything. So I talked to people about getting involved in politics because I wanted to do something about it, because I knew we needed more effort. And what happened is some folks who were very skilled in politics already looked at my background, and they said, you would fit with the lieutenant governor race, because the lieutenant governor is the point man for business in Nevada. Businesses rely on workforce. Quality of workforce is determined by education. So that's how I got into politics. And what happened was, the reason I'm here now is that was my first time when I ran against Stavros Anthony. He only edged me out in the primary by 5.8%. Yeah. I won 13 of the 17 Nevada counties. So in the interim, a lot of people have said, we want you to stay involved in politics, because they've seen my track record. So when I look at the fact that I understand military strategy and the military instrument of power, that I understand diplomacy, foreign policy, and the economic instrument of power, there is no other Republican candidate that has that wide background. So I have the skill set to work in the Senate. I understand it. But more importantly, we need to unseat an incumbent who has been Jackie Rosen has been a rubber stamp for the horrendous Biden policies that are costing Nevadans $11,400 more a year just to stay even, just to live. Okay, so we don't need that leadership. But the problem is, our system is skewed towards the incumbent.
Yes, they are.
So if we're going to unseat an incumbent, we have to have a compelling value proposition. I present that compelling value proposition.
Well, in the few moments that we have left, I guess the question that I have on behalf of the Vegas Voice and all our readers is, why should seniors vote for you? This is your chance. Address the camera if you want. I want to know why people in Sun City Anthem and Sun City Summerlin, the senior community, they should vote for Tony Grady, because
the seniors should vote for me because I believe in American values. I have served well in the military, and I want to go into the Senate to bring ideas that don't come from politicians who've never done anything. I've lived and I've raised a family. I understand how difficult it is when people have fixed incomes. That's why the Biden policies that are causing us to spend as much as $11,400 more a year, that's wrong. Jackie Rosen has been a rubber stamp for Biden's policy. So the seniors should vote for me because I have the experience to be able to work in the Senate. I have their interests at heart, and I want to make sure that the future that has their children and grandchildren is brighter than the path we're on today. That's why.
Fair enough. People want more information about you. They want to volunteer. They want to contribute money. How do they get a hold of you and your campaign?
I would like everybody to go to GradyForNevada.com. It's my last name, GradyFor, Nevada spelled out, .com. On GradyForNevada.com, right there at the top, you can register for our newsletter and stay on top of what's going on. You can donate. And I am the grassroots candidate. I have not been chosen by Washington, D.C. We need a whole nother show for that.
And I think we will do that, yes.
But the reality is that I'm the grassroots candidate, and I have your interests at heart. So go to GradyForNevada.com and register, and you can reach out to our campaign. Please volunteer. We would love to have as many people in Clark County that would come alongside of us so that we can get the word out. I am Tony Grady, running to be your next U.S. Senator. Aim high, Nevada.
There you go. Tony, I thank you so much for being here, taking the time to come in and sit with us. We would like to have you again when the time comes up. And again, I thank you. And this is Dan Roberts for the Vegas Voice and Seniors Vote, and saying we'll see you next time.